I think the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, is so refreshing. She is straight talking. She is no nonsense, no fuss. She gets on with it. She is the hardest working royal last year and for many, many years.
I'm grateful because you've come together as a group. Interestingly, if you like, I'm not here because this was my choice. You very kindly asked me to become patron of your organizations.
It was meant to be just another peaceful morning at Windsor, with cloudy sky, cool marble floors, and a royal staff trained to hush. However, behind the thick doors of the king's private wing, something irreparable had already begun. King Charles III, feeble and pallid behind layers of cashmere and remorse, was no longer the powerful figure shown at his coronation. The prince who had waited his entire life to wear the crown now appeared to be prepared to give it go, not with grandeur or a public address, but with a whispered request, spoken exclusively to his sister, Princess Anne. Outside the room, Prince William waited, not only as a son, but as the heir, the future. The man had been promised his entire life that one day, all of this will be his. Something felt strange that morning, though. The guards did not meet his gaze. The workers did not extend their regular curtsies, and most revealing of all, Anne was nowhere to be seen, even though her car had arrived before sunrise. What happened in that room was never supposed to be revealed, not to Camilla, Kate, or William. However, royal secrets have a tendency of leaking, especially when they are very personal. And this one would do more than rock the castle. It would ruin the man who was supposed to command it next. The rumbling began quietly. Princess Anne began receiving more calls from the Prime Minister. She attended closed-door sessions with Charles, but William was quietly excluded. Camilla's tone became caustic. Kate's concern grew. Nonetheless, no one could obtain a clear response regarding what the king had stated in his final conscious hours. Until a letter emerged, the royal crest-sealed document marked "To be opened upon my silence" was presented to William by Anne rather than his father. And when he read the contents, when he discovered what his own father had demanded of his sister rather of him, everything changed. He did not just sit in startled silence. He collapsed. When the king fails to make his final request to his son, the monarchy's destiny is fractured rather than just shifting. What had Charles confided to Anne that he could not tell William? And why did the Prince of Wales's final wish go fully unfulfilled? The answers are hidden behind palace doors, in a realm where love, legacy, and allegiance intersect in the shadows. It all began with the dying king's final words. The royal physician stopped smiling, which was the first serious indicator that something was amiss. Until then, King Charles had been dealing with his sickness using the royal family's traditional combination of tight-lipped denial and carefully staged appearances. Yes, he appeared a little slimmer. Yes, there were murmurs of continuing therapy. But the official statement was always the same. The king is in excellent health and remains active in his duties. That was a lie, a purposeful one. Privately, Charles had experienced a series of mini-strokes in fast succession. The latest one, though never officially acknowledged, was severe enough to immobilize his left hand for many hours and cause him to slur his speech for days. His aides said it was a fatigue episode, but those closest to him knew better. The king was unraveling, fast. And while the body falters, the mind races. Charles got obsessed with his legacy. Not only would he be remembered, but also who would carry the crown forward, and if they were prepared. That question, as it turned out, tormented him. He started calling Princess Anne into private meetings more regularly, sometimes early in the morning, other times far after midnight. Their talks were kept private, and not even his closest personal secretary was permitted in. It was only the two siblings behind locked doors, sometimes for hours. Anne would shrug and say, "Family matters." But what kind of family matters necessitated that level of secrecy? What needed official documentation, handwritten notes, and several copies kept in different royal safes? Insiders claim Charles trusted Anne more than anybody else in the firm, even his own sons. To him, she was devoted but not ambitious. She had no aspirations for the throne, no scandals, and no apparent goal. She was a soldier, a stateswoman, and most importantly, someone who had never made negative news. Camilla was noticeably missing throughout these discussions. While Anne came through the front halls, Camilla was frequently seen pacing in the grounds, seeking reports from attendants who had none. Some claim she began to think something was being taken from her, and she was correct. Charles has become chilly with his wife in recent weeks. Perhaps he noticed how unpopular she was in the eyes of the people. Perhaps Charles just realized too late that the monarchy could not withstand another controversy, and Camilla was always a lightning target for criticism. In any case, he started planning for what would happen once his rule ended, and he wanted Anne to handle the pen. One of the most unsettling scenes occurred when Charles reportedly informed Anne, during a clear window, "You're the only one who won't chase the crown while pretending not to." Anne did not react. She did not need to. According to sources, this is when the fateful request was made, the one that changed everything. Despite the fact that no one else was there at the time but the two of them, others who later read the letter stated that Charles did not mince words. He did not feel William was entirely prepared to deal with the pressures of the crown amid a national transformation. With the globe on fire, economic upheaval, political instability, and waning royal popularity, the king was concerned that transferring the throne directly to William might cause the institution to collapse. So he made one more exceptional request. Anne would act as regent in the case of his incapacitation or death. Not Camilla, not William, Anne. The crown would wait. It was a profound betrayal, one that the public would never know, at least not soon away. Nonetheless, everything was done lawfully. In times of crisis, the monarch has the authority to appoint or suggest a regent to Parliament for approval, and Charles had done just that. As time passed, Charles got quieter, sliding in and out of clarity. But Anne stayed calm, never displaying emotion, never letting anything leak. She had accepted the responsibility that her brother had imposed on her. But outside of that closed-off environment, William had no idea what was coming. And when he found out, he would fall on his knees. For weeks, Prince William convinced himself that it was all paranoia. He was the first to notice the quiet, which was initially mild but then became apparent. He was not present at as many royal briefings. Fewer aides received his calls quickly. Meetings for succession planning were abruptly postponed or shifted to senior personnel with no explanation. It was as if someone had gently, systematically, and unexpectedly taken away his regal function. Initially, he blamed the stress. After all, his father was critically ill, and the palace was in emergency mode. But there was something else gnawing at him, something colder. Princess Anne. Anne was usually reticent, but now she had become completely unreadable. She ceased exchanging niceties, refused to meet his eyes, and avoided every attempt William made to talk with her alone. Even during family gatherings, brief hospital visits, prayer vigils, ceremonial handovers, she stayed close to Charles while remaining far from William. He could feel it. She was protecting something. Camilla's conduct exacerbated William's developing concern. She appeared apprehensive and even desperate at moments. She would approach William in the halls and say things like, "Your father isn't thinking clearly right now," or You need to be strong for what's ahead." But when he questioned her directly if anything was wrong, she merely smiled and caressed his arm, never giving him a true response. The warning indicators appeared next. Quiet leaks from the palace. Royal journalists started muttering in secret language on television. One journalist alluded to a strategic regency conversation, while another described Anne as a stabilizing force in uncertain times. None of them mentioned names, but they didn't have to. William felt the walls close in. Then came the letter. Not the final one, not yet, but a hint. A subordinate staffer, apparently nervous, gave William a briefing envelope intended for Anne. Inside was a single page penned by King Charles. It reads, "Make no announcements until I am incapable. Anne knows what to do. I trust her judgment." William froze. That was hardly a fatherly comfort. That was a monarch's command, and it did not include him. His chest constricted. He reread the message, thinking he had misunderstood. The reality, however, was glaring back at him in print. Still, no one had made any public statements. There is no declaration. There is no change in titles. So William did what he was trained to do. He waited. But internally, he was unraveling. Kate also spotted it. She discovered him pacing their private house in the middle of the night. He stopped consuming entire meals. He snapped at his aides. When she eventually questioned what was wrong, he simply said, "I believe they have made a choice, and it is not me." Kate, always composed, took matters into her own hands. "If Anne won't come to you," she said, "then I will go to her." William nodded in defeat, because for the first time in his life, the future king felt helpless over his own realm, and the sister he trusted the most had gone quiet. The crown wasn't just sliding through his fingers, it was being stolen, one quiet talk at a time. Gatcombe Park was unusually quiet that morning. Kate's automobile purposefully drove up the long gravel road, her driver under tight instructions to wait with the engine running. She wasn't in the drawing room for small talk or tea. She was looking for solutions. The only individual who possessed them was Princess Anne. When Kate arrived, the Princess Royal was already waiting on the terrace, dressed in her typical no-nonsense riding gear with arms crossed and an inscrutable face. She hadn't invited Kate, hadn't even returned her calls, but something about her demeanor suggested she had anticipated her visit. "Catherine," Anne answered calmly. "Anne," Kate said steadily yet firmly. The stillness between them stretched. Two women at the heart of Britain's most powerful institution, each bearing the weight of their respective branch of the monarchy. However, titles were no longer relevant today. This was not about protocol. This was about William. Kate didn't spend any time. "He's not sleeping," she explained. "He isn't eating. He walks around the palace like a ghost." Anne did not flinch. "He doesn't know what's going on, and neither do I. But you do." Kate's voice was low, but her words hit hard. "And I want to know what my husband is being kept in the dark about." Anne glanced aside, her gaze going to the stables. For a time it appeared like she may not respond, but then she spoke, low, measured, and cautious. "Your husband is the heir. That has not changed." Kate stepped forward. "So why does it feel like the crown is being moved around him?" Anne's jaws constricted. "Because there are things you do not comprehend, Catherine. Things he's not prepared to confront." The words landed like a smack. Kate started, taken aback not by the substance but by Anne's assurance. "Are you not ready?" she repeated. "He has been planning for this his entire life, and if you and Charles think—" Anne cut her off. "It's not about his heart or commitment. It's about timing, stability. The world beyond these walls is disintegrating, and your spouse is still figuring out how to manage his own kingdom without collapsing." Kate's composure wavered. "He's not a child, he's a father. a leader, the future king. Anne finally looked her in the eyes. And that's exactly why Charles made the request he did. There it was, what Kate had suspected but refused to believe. She did not need Anne to state it directly. The expression in her eyes spoke everything. "Charles asked you, didn't he?" Kate whispered. "He wanted you to step in, to act as regent." Anne did not refute it. She did not confirm it either. Anne did not refute it. She did not confirm it either. She just turned and proceeded toward the house, stopping at the doorway. "I love William," she replied, looking over her shoulder. "But love does not crown kings. Readiness works." And with that, she vanished inside, leaving Kate alone, shocked, indignant, and determined as ever. Because she now recognized that this was more than simply Charles's legacy. It was about a family that still didn't recognize William for who he really was. Despite his readiness to lead, he was compelled to remain in the shadows of people who did not believe in his abilities. It arrived in a black envelope embossed with the royal crest. There was no ceremony. There is no audience. There are no cameras. Anne stood calmly in the corridor outside William's private study at Clarence House, holding the document as if it weighed more than gold. She didn't say anything when she delivered it to him, just nodded once before turning away. William looked at it for a few seconds before peeling it open. He recognized the handwriting instantly, his father's. The initial lines were basic, a salutation, a message of love, a father addressing his kid. But suddenly the tone changed, from compassionate to royal, from Charles to king. "If I am unable to govern, the crown will not instantly transfer to you. I have requested that Parliament acknowledge a temporary regency under your aunt, Princess Anne. This is not about love or lineage. It is a matter of preparation and preservation." William's breath was stopped in his chest. His gaze shifted back to the seal, frantically hoping that this was some kind of terrible joke. But it wasn't. The letter continued. "You will lead in time. However, the crown must pass through calm seas, not storms. Anne will bear the burden until the nation is ready to welcome you, and you, it." His fingers shook as he read the last line. "Forgive me for what I couldn't say aloud, but this is what I feel is correct. No signature, just a date and a faded ink smudge, a warning that even rulers may fall." William leaned back on the leather chair behind him. His whole body felt numb. The air in the room became thicker. He'd been bypassed, not by law, but by will. His own father's last will. Charles never genuinely believed in himself despite his public performances, speeches, and rehearsals. Not enough to entrust him with the throne in the most important moment. The betrayal was severe. William allegedly slumped forward, head in his hands, crying quietly. Staff outside heard a smash, the sound of a paperweight being thrown across the room. No one feared to enter. Kate would later find him seated on the floor, tears streaming down his cheeks, with the letter sprawled over his knees. "He didn't trust me," he said quietly. "He trusted her." The venom in his speech did not reflect the guy the public knew. This was not the composed and duty-bound Prince of Wales. This was the kid of a king who had just realized he'd been abandoned. There'd be no press release, no announcement. The monarchy would quietly make changes to its plans, and the people would be informed as necessary. But beyond the royal gates, the reality was irreversible. Charles chose Anne to carry the crown's weight throughout the changeover, perhaps delaying William's ascent for months or more. For William, the letter represented more than simply a delay. It was an indictment, a vote of no confidence from the guy whose approval had always been crucial. He had lost the crown, not through death or disgrace, but via a signature written in the silence of a dying king's room. The loss left him broken in ways that the world may never completely understand. The news reached Camilla like a blade in the dark, not through an official document or a royal advisor, but through murmurs ringing down the palace hallways. Servants talked in low tones. Doors were being closed more frequently, and Princess Anne, who had hitherto been tolerated, now appeared to command the air surrounding her like a ruler. The ultimate blow came when Charles' letter surfaced, the same letter William had read in startled stillness, naming Anne regent. Camilla hadn't been mentioned, not once. No mention of Queen Consort's abilities. There are no particular instructions. There are no title improvements. Nothing. She'd been obliterated, and she snapped. The Queen Consort, who had spent decades working her way from the edges of controversy to the heart of royal life, burst in such a fit of rage that workers were forced to flee the East Wing. The lady who had previously been insulted by tabloids, humiliated in public, and reluctantly embraced by the British people had been promised something. Control. He promised me. She was heard screaming. He looked me in the eyes and said, "You'll guide them after I'm gone." So now what? I'm supposed to sit and watch Anne take the reins like a noble martyr? Camilla felt ashamed, not just furious. She had assumed that when Charles's time came, the palace would naturally turn to her. After all, she'd been with him for decades. She had endured the Diana years. She'd been crowned Queen Consort. In her mind, there was no doubt, if necessary, the regency would pass to her. But Charles had never completely trusted her with authority beyond her own. In his dying act, he picked his sister above his wife. Camilla marched into a private meeting at Clarence House, ignoring aides and procedure to face Anne directly. The showdown that ensued would become palace folklore. "I earned this," Camilla said, her voice shaking. "I was promised this. After everything I went through for him, I deserved more than this insult." Anne, who is known for her composure, is said to have kept her voice down. She merely folded her hands and stated, "The monarchy does not operate on personal pledges. It relies on stability." And he made his decision. Camilla's eyes flashed. "He made it in terror, in perplexity. You manipulated him." Anne did not flinch. He made it clear, because he knew what was coming, and he knew who could handle it. The room went quiet. Camilla appeared to be about to lunge, not physically, but emotionally, trying to reclaim the appearance of dominance. But even she understood the truth. Charles had put pen to paper. Parliament had been notified. The machines were already in action. There was no reversing it. Her tantrum was more than simply a reaction to being missed. It was the end of a well-crafted dream, a future in which she wielded the scepter without wearing the crown, discreetly creating the next king in her own image. Anne now had control over her future. Camilla saw this as more than just a betrayal. It was a public annihilation of all she had labored to achieve. As she went out of the chamber, the Queen Consort stopped storming. She was disintegrating. The gates of Balmoral were tightly sealed. The press was kept at bay. And behind the towering stone walls of Britain's most exclusive estate, the royal family prepared for a new type of stillness. King Charles had fallen asleep days before, and his health was now deemed fatal. There would be no concluding broadcast speech. There is no formal handoff. Just a well-controlled vacuum, which the palace said was a transition in progress. However, the cracks inside the firm could no longer be disguised. Prince William has completely abandoned his public obligations. Official announcements stated that he was with family, but sources close to the family revealed a far more painful truth. He had withdrawn, both emotionally and physically, from the institution he had spent his entire preparation to lead. Friends described him as devastated, confused, and deeply wounded. Kate, on the other hand, remained unwavering for the cameras, the children, and the legacy she was committed to preserve. However, Many close to her claimed she had become colder, more attentive, and less forgiving. Something about her had altered as a result of her meeting with Anne. She now understood how quickly power could be shifted, and how even the best prepared might be replaced in quiet. Princess Anne quickly rose to prominence as the monarchy's symbol, attending briefings, standing in for Charles at state occasions, and answering discreet questions from Parliament. She didn't want the spotlight, but the crown had placed it on her shoulders, and she took it without complaint. Camilla vanished. No appearances, no statements, just whispers of stress, isolation, and a lady silently lamenting not only her husband's illness, but also her own waning importance. And the people? They waited, perplexed and interested, yearning for answers that the palace refused to provide. The monarchy had not fallen. However, it had not gone forward either. It lay in limbo, suspended between generations, and trapped in the shadow of a dying king's final whisper. At the middle of it all stood a prince who had been reared for a crown, only to discover far too late that his father had given it, although temporarily, to someone else.